US President Donald Trump seemed to backtrack on his aggressive push for Greenland. He has called off the proposed tariffs on European allies and claimed a framework agreement was on the cards. Now, the softening of the tone came after Trump held talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Davos. According to reports, Trump's change of tone was the result of a compromise proposed by Rutte on behalf of NATO allies. The New York Times, citing 3 senior officials, reported that the compromise was formulated during a meeting with top military officers from the NATO alliance's member states. Under the compromise, Denmark would give the US sovereignty over small pockets of Greenlandic land, and the US could then build military bases over there. Well, US already has a base in Greenland. The Pituffik Space Base is a United States Space Force base located on the northwest coast. The base part is a part of the defense agreement between Denmark and the United States. The report said that the idea of US being given sovereignty over some Greenlandic land was pursued by Rutte. But the officials did not know if the idea was part of the framework announced by Donald Trump. Now, Trump has not provided any details on the framework as of yet. But after the meeting with Rutte, the US president posted that he and Rutte have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. Trump said that he will not impose his proposed tariffs against 8 nations. He also indicated that discussions would include a Golden Dome missile defense system.
It's a deal that people jumped at. Really fantastic for the USA. Gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
Well, earlier addressing Davos for the first time in 6 years, Trump had struck a much harsher tone. Reiterating his desire for Greenland, he claimed that all he's asking for is a piece of ice that can play a vital role in world peace and world protection. Trump also called Denmark ungrateful, but appeared to take the threat of military action off the table.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
Rutte said that much work remained on Greenland. He later said that he did not discuss the key issue of Danish sovereignty over Greenland in his meeting with Donald Trump.
That issue did not come up anymore in my conversations tonight with the President. He's very much focused on what do we need to do to make sure that that huge Arctic region, where change is taking place at the moment, where the Chinese and Russians are more and more active, how we can protect that. That was really the focus of our discussions.
Well, Europe has presented a united front in face of Trump's repeated push to take over Greenland. But it has also tried to avoid direct confrontation with US, which is a NATO founder member. It remains to be seen whether the reported compromise made will satisfy Trump's concerns over Russian and Chinese threats over Greenland, or will he ask for more? After all, the only predictable thing about the US president is that he is unpredictable. And to unpack it further, we're now being joined live on the broadcast by Colin Strong-Ukit. He is a Foreign Affairs and Security Strategist, University of Malaya. And we also have with us Dr. Sergei Sumleny, who is a defense expert and director, European Resilience Initiative Center. Thank you so much both for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump now says a deal is in sight on Greenland, and the rhetoric around force or sweeping tariffs has noticeably softened. Now, Dr. Sumleny, from your reading of the signals so far, does this mark a tactical climb down, or is this just Trump achieving his objective through pressure without having to escalate?
Well, the problem seems to be that the West and NATO are not prepared for such a problem, like a president of the largest NATO ally country who operates in a mood or in a modus like we know from Vladimir Putin or from other people, like denying the existing treaties, denying the basics of international law, threatening, lying, threatening again, and pushing his narratives. The security of NATO, including security of Denmark, was based for decades on a presumption that the US is a fundamental factor of this security. And in the case of a foreign aggression or foreign pressure, it will be the United States who will hurry to support and to help. What to do in a situation when the President of the United States openly threatens with an aggression? It's not written in the textbooks, and now the Western governments seems to be completely disoriented. They tried to calm Trump down for the last months, including Mark Rutte, who called him daddy on Twitter. What a language for a politician. And now they see it doesn't work. Trump wants more as he sees weakness.
We hear you, Dr. Sumleni. Now, at Davos, Trump has downplayed Greenland as just a piece of ice, even mistakenly calling it Iceland on 4 different occasions, and while at the same time insisting on US ownership. Now, this rhetorical contradiction, asking for something while insisting that it's barely worth having, is a classic deal-making positioning. Now, in light of the latest developments, Collins, do you think that his tactic has worked out yet again?
Yes, we have seen how Greenland is, extremely important to the US, of course, also to Europe. He is right. He is right when he argued that the Chinese presence, the Russian presence in the Arctic, in Greenland, has been increasing in recent years, and Denmark and NATO and Europe have failed to prevent these steps, and only Washington has the hard power capacity to do that. And of course, we have seen how this is not a backtrack. This is, of course, the decision by President Trump to give Europe some face-saving momentum. We have seen how this is still in the early stages, and he is right when he argued that Europe has failed and NATO has failed to protect Greenland, despite the efforts now recently to increase some power presence there, but it's too little, too late now. And this is strategically important for the US to ensure that the security and safety of the Western Hemisphere, especially of the US, will be protected by only the hard power capacity of Washington, which NATO lacks. And of course, we have seen how the EU or Europe or NATO, they have no independent Arctic military capacity to confront the increased power presence by Russia and China. China has termed the Arctic as termed itself as the near Arctic power, and Denmark depends on NATO, while NATO depends on the US for the security umbrella. So this is critically important. Of course, as part of the larger Golden Dome plan of President Trump, and by securing Greenland, it is to ensure that the security of Europe also is being strengthened in the near future. And this is something that NATO, could never have done without the support of President Trump. So this is not a face-saving. This is not a backtrack by President Trump. It is a strategic plan, a strategic move by President Trump, a classic realpolitik move to, of course, to diffuse alliance backlash, to avoid market panic, to stabilize the NATO cohesion. Of course, also to institutionalize the U.S. Arctic leadership and to bring this critical, sensitive topic forward to ensure that this has not been being put at the forefront for years now. And his predecessors have tried to do it but failed. And this is the critical timeline for the U.S. to reassert the needed U.S. Power primacy and supremacy on the Arctic to ensure that the security of the U.S., the security of Europe, and the security of the world are being preserved. And this can only be achieved through this unconventional method and the approaches by President Trump, and of course also to secure Europe in the long run, and of course to lock out and to deter and to halt the momentum of China and Russia in this part of the world.
Right, and speaking of those unconventional methods, after rattling the transatlantic alliance with weeks of rhetoric, the US president said the meeting has now led to a framework of a potential agreement. Although the details have not been shared in its entirety, do you think Trump is one step closer to achieving his Greenland acquisition plan, Dr. Sumleni?
Well, it depends on what can we call the final result, which is good for Trump. We don't even know if his final goal is to like get physical control over Greenland. We know that there are strange movements on the markets, which can be led to some people who know more about the next moves of Donald Trump. There have been bets on the poly market, and like people bet on absolutely weird things like how long will be the speech of the press secretary of the White House? Will it be under 30 minutes or over 30 minutes? What will be the next Trump move? And it seems that some people who have an idea where it goes, they earn a lot of money on just placing bets online. And from this perspective, any disturbance on the markets and disturbance caused by erratic sayings by Donald Trump, they can make these people rich. Who are these people? Yeah, we can only speculate that it can be one of the reasons to create such disturbance just to get richer.
Right, and Europe has presented a united front in face of Trump's repeated push to take over Greenland. And we've also heard Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney calling this moment a moment of rupture rather than a moment of transition. Now, Collins, would you think that it was this united EU front that made Donald Trump come to this strategic back front, as you mentioned earlier?
Well, we have seen how, Trump has redefined the status of Greenland. And of course, he has exposed the dependency of Europe on Washington as part of the larger security umbrella. And of course, he has locked in the primacy of the US over the Arctic. And by having this move, he also, he has prevented further, power presence and strategic encroachment by China and Russia, and setting these, conditions for future consolidation without war. But this is not a backtrack. I don't see this as a, as a backtrack for Trump. It's not a retreat from Trump. It's the first phase of consolidation. As I've stated, it's still in the very early stages, and we have yet to see the remaining negotiations. But Greenland is effectively already under U.S. strategic control. The paperwork can come later. But the ultimate timeline, the ultimate ultimatum is for to raise this notion of this increasingly fragile transatlantic ties, and we have seen how President Trump has also single-handedly revived, rejuvenated NATO, and for this kind of sustained doubling down by Europe and by NATO to oppose President Trump's move, I think is backfiring. And of course, we have seen how the tit for tat move in terms of tariff, and a lot of analysts have also pointed out that this is a strategic retreat by President Trump. But I don't think so. I don't see any point for him to retreat. But he has all the options on his table to do that. But of course, the first ultimate tool will be to ensure that diplomatic approaches, negotiations will be the first timeline. But of course, all options are still remain on the table, and it remains to be seen which part of Greenland and how will be the volume and depth of the strategic content of over the negotiations that can take place later on. But and I think this is critically important, and European partners are cognizant of the fact that Greenland's security will still need to be under the main framework of the U.S. security umbrella, and this is something I think a reality that even NATO and Europe will need to admit, and only President Trump can ensure that in the years to come.
Well, of course, we'll have to wait and see how the situation unfolds. But for now, thank you so much, Dr. Somleni and Mr. Collins, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your insights with us.